let's talk about BYU football recruiting. Now, I had a handful of questions via our Locked On Cougars Insider group. Ask about different updates. Guys like Jax Turner, that came from Dean. Also, questions about Braxton Lindsay, Carter Harrison. Any news on the Pula twins? I think the biggest thing to take away is that all those guys are obviously going to make their announcements in due time. If you want my gut feeling on those, I guess, four in this case players, the Pulas, I fully expect them to be at Utah. Jax Tanner as well as Braxton Lindsay, I think BYU is firmly in the mix for both of them. And I think, quite frankly, BYU, if they miss out on those two, be feeling pretty down about themselves. They don't have to feel down overall about their recruiting prowess in 2026. They've got a 5-star prospect in Ryder Lyons, multiple 4-star prospects, and some very high-level 3-stars that have already committed to this BYU recruiting class. And that brings me to the question from Ethan. He asked this, Jake, I saw BYU's recruiting ranking on 24/7 Sports is currently 25th in the country. Can BYU improve on that, or are they at the ceiling they can get to for this upcoming recruiting cycle? It's a great question, Ethan, but the biggest point I want to make here is BYU, and I've said it once on this podcast, I'll say it again, is having an absolutely historic year when it comes to recruiting. BYU is absolutely killing it. Yes, they are top 25 in the country right now, and absolutely could rise even further in the rankings should they pull off a few more recruiting wins, the likes of Jax Tanner, Braxton Lindsay, I think Jackson Gates. Every one of those guys, that those high-level 3, maybe borderline 4-star prospects, every single one of them will only make BYU's recruiting class that much better and thereby improve BYU's recruiting ranking when it comes to the 2026 recruiting cycle. The biggest thing they have to avoid here, and it's something that Drake mentioned on that crossover edition in passing yesterday, and something I've been pondering as well, is that BYU, they've got a really, really good thing going on the recruiting front right now with all the momentum they've built up. They have to avoid a disastrous season this year and watch some of those guys, maybe a handful of them, renege on their promises and then thereby watch your recruiting ranking fall off. I think the vast majority of guys who commit to BYU are dead set on joining the Cougars. It's a program that you know what you're getting into when you pick BYU. And some would argue that guys are obviously got stars in their eyes with what BYU accomplished a season ago. Yeah, maybe they do. But what BYU accomplished a season ago was be a national force and be in the national conversation all season long. They won 11 games. They played what I consider to be the toughest schedule in program history. Speaking of having to face 10 Power 5 opponents, they had never done that in their program's history. And I think BYU came off the better for it, obviously, when it comes to recruiting. They have parlayed that success last season into the recruiting process in 2026. But it cannot be a one-year deal. You can't have what could end up maybe being a top 20 recruiting class and then regress into the 50s or the 60s next year. No, sir, you cannot do that. For BYU to be the force I think that they hope to be in the Big 12, they've got to be, I think, at worst, a top 40 recruiting program every single season. How do you do that? Well, you win on the field, obviously. Number 2, you have a bunch of dogged recruiters on your staff who are getting after it. And I think BYU's got a really, really good staff right now that obviously are pounding the pavement, loving up their prospects. BYU's invested a little more heavily when it comes to what I call behind the scenes staff when it comes to recruiting. Not quite to the level I hope. I think they'll be continue to be adding to this, but they've done a better job on that front. And every part of that has yielded the results BYU has so far with that top 25 recruiting class. It can only get better from here if BYU keeps stacking up these recruiting wins. And they're absolutely killing it in state. Kawe Akana as well as Lopeti Moala, the most recent ones who committed earlier this week. And I think both of them are really, really solid pickups, if not outstanding pickups, considering you look at their prowess, their ability, their versatility in terms of being multi-sport athletes. BYU is absolutely, I think, crushing it on the recruiting front. But once again, A, it cannot be a one-year deal. And B, you can't go out and have a season that falls off a cliff because you lost your starting quarterback and then see some of these guys scattered to other programs. Because the thing about it is right now, every one of the guys BYU has committed are just that. It's a verbal commitment. There has been no pen to paper or DocuSign online document to lock these guys in to their grants and aid and whatever other mechanisms you use, national letters of intent, etc., to lock them in with your program. That will come in December. There are still ways to go to make sure these guys stick with BYU. And you can be assured that everybody from Ryder Lyons all the way to Graham Livingston and anyone in between in BYU's recruiting class right now are still hearing from other programs, other coaches saying, hey, you sure you're that solid with BYU? Why don't you come out, check out X University here? That will be happening for days, weeks, and months to come until that national early signing window begins in December. BYU's got to stay on it and absolutely have to continue to stack up those wins. But Ethan, to your point, it's been a really, really nice thing to watch BYU win on the recruiting trail. It's fun to watch. It's fun to track. It builds a lot of, I think, momentum in terms of other prospects saying, hey, if these guys are picking BYU, why am I not looking a little closer at the Cougars? And in turn, those guys who are committed, the Ryder Lyons of the world, the Bott Mulitalos, you look at Brock Harris. Brock Harris is a fiend on social media in terms of pumping up BYU and trying to get other recruits to commit to the BYU football program. You need all of that if you want to succeed and win at the highest levels of college football, which I fully believe BYU is intent on doing. They want to win the Big 12. They want to be a dominant force at the Power 4 level. And you know what that takes? Investment. You know what that takes? It takes winning recruiting battles and winning them often. I like the track BYU's on right now. They're absolutely on a historic pace. They're going to put together what I will consider to be the best recruiting class in program history. I know that 2010 with Jake Heaps, Zach Stout, and Ross Oppo headlining it, didn't that finish, I think, number 24 in the rankings according to 24/7 Sports? But considering BYU's 25 right now, and I still expect a handful of guys from that last window of official visits for BYU to commit in coming days and weeks. BYU's assuredly going to move up in those national rankings and very well could put together their best class, at least in the modern recruiting rankings history. And these are the type of classes that could propel BYU to Big 12 superstardom, to propel them to playing in the Big 12 title game, to propel them to playing in the college football playoff and having a shout as to actually winning a national championship. It is not going to be an easy path for BYU because there are guys out there that are absolutely not interested in BYU simply due to honor code, stringent academics, not wanting to live in Provo, Utah. There's a handful of things out there that can still be used against BYU, but when BYU continues to win at the level they've been winning at, why wouldn't you consider the Cougars if you're a high-level prospect? They have proven to be keen developers of talent, and they've done it with 2- and 3-star talents for most of Kalani Sitake's tenure. Imagine getting some of the 4 stars, and in the case of Ryder Lyons, 5 stars into this program. How much better, how much more development, and how much just more elite could BYU look with those type of talents and the development aspect that BYU is very well known for? Feels like the sky's the limit for BYU, and that's why, yeah, they're on a historic pace right now, but it's got to continue. It cannot be a one-off and think that you've arrived. You have to continue to win on the field and win in the recruiting sphere, and those two, they go in concert with one another. The momentum you generate on both sides only help you do more and be better as a football program. That's something that BYU absolutely has to continue to focus in on and continue to invest in it as well if they want to be a top tier Big 12 program.